Then I see people are entering the room, but we have to start. We have a tight schedule here. So welcome to the keynote of the doctoral symposium at EXA this year. It is my great pleasure to introduce Radu Calinescu, who is a reader at the University in York in UK. He is a leader of the research team there on trustworthy systems, autonomous systems, self-adaptive systems. Radu, I don't want to waste your time here by introducing you. Anybody who wants to know more about you, have a look at his website with really good information. Everything is there. So if you have questions, please post them in the meeting chat, and I will pick them up there after the talk to moderate the questions and answers. Radu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Danny and Patricia, and thank you for the introduction, Danny. I have to say that my presentation today is the result of much frustration, but also joy. It is frustration at PhD students not doing justice to their often excellent research by publishing it in minor venues sometimes, but also joy when they actually manage to publish in a top venue. So hopefully I'll give PhD students some ideas that will make your supervisors experience less of the frustration and more of the joy. So let's see. So I want to first maybe clarify what I mean by these top venues and why you might care about them. So these are really conferences and journals that are highly regarded, leading conferences and journals, and they very much represent a seal of quality. So if you do publish in these venues, then there is a better chance that the result of your many years, many months of hard work will make a difference in some way. Someone will use them. Also, it'll make your PhD viva much easier. Both examiners and yourselves will feel more confident going into this examination, and there will be less questioning and more smiling. Of course, it'll give you also better prospects in terms of research academic career should you publish in these venues. So these are some of the questions that my PhD students ask every so often. Is my research good enough for top venues? How do I even find what the top venues are? And what do reviewers and editors want so I get my research published in the venues that you keep telling us about? What do readers want? So I want to cover these questions and then to maybe go through a number of pitfalls that myself, my colleagues are noticing when reviewing submissions by PhD students. Okay, so is your research good enough? Well, if it does present a novel idea, and you see some example of reviewer comments from PC discussions and reviews at conferences, then if you have a novel idea, your research will be good enough. If it solves a real problem, then your research will be good enough. Of course, you need to solve this real problem either for the first time or potentially more effectively based on some clear criteria, scalability, accuracy of results, and so on. I have to say that it is the first option, solving a real problem for the first time, that is easier to justify, so maybe something to keep in mind. Otherwise, significant effort might be needed to just demonstrate that your solution is more effective. So I have to say that my view is very much that PhD projects make research contributions that are very likely to satisfy all of these prerequisites. So what is missing? Well, to understand what is often missing, you need to take a different perspective on this. And to look at what is often expected of publications in top venues, and this is originality, rigor, and impact. And if you sort of map the prerequisites to this, what you will often notice is that originality is very well covered by the fact that you present a novel idea, that a problem is being solved for the first time, it is solved more effectively. There is some element of impact in the fact that you solve a real problem, someone cares about it. But the problem is that rigor in particular, but also impact to some extent, heavily rely on how carefully and how diligently you carry out the research and how carefully and diligently you evaluate and present it. And often these two components require much more effort than you would usually expect. So I hope I convinced you that often your research will be good enough, but you need to make this additional effort. How do you find the top research venues for the area? Well, there is no better way of identifying these top research venues than asking your PhD supervisor. They do indeed know best. So that is one first step. You can also look up the members of the program committee, the editorial board members, if you submit to a journal, and that'll give you an idea of the ranking of the research venue. And finally, you can check a ranking database that is presenting a good overview of these venues. Here's one of them from Australia that I would recommend, and you can immediately see that you are in the right conference. EXA is rated as an excellent conference in this database. Okay, so hopefully this will also help you identify suitable venues for your research. Now, maybe this is a trickier question. What do reviewers want and what do editors want from their papers? What about readers? Well, the reality is that reviewers and editors really want to have their publications downloaded. They want to have research papers read by others, cited. They want to have the solutions proposed in these publications used by other researchers, used by practitioners. They would use them to maybe extend the solution, to build on it, to deploy it in applications. Should you submit to a conference, they will also want the presentation of your research to attract questions, to attract participants willing to attend the session and your presentation. Pretty much, I think that this can be summarized by the desire to have the state-of-the-art advanced, to have the research community grown. So there is a continuity to the success of the venue. Now, what makes us do all this? I'm asking this additional question because researchers and practitioners are ourselves, really. You as PhD students would need to do all of these things to give value to a published research. So what does make us do all this? What does make us download and read and cite, use, extend research results? Well, we do all of this if several conditions are satisfied. We want to understand what we find in a research paper. If you don't understand what is published, then we won't be using it. We want to be able to implement the solution they propose in a research paper. We want to have confidence that our work will be justified because building on top of that solution, we are going to achieve something that also works. We want to know the assumptions. I don't want to guess whether the approach described in a research paper fits my needs or not. That needs to be described in the paper alongside the benefits and the limitation of the proposed solution. Furthermore, we want to have some confidence that the effort we put into adopting this research is going to be justified by the benefits we achieve. You need to do quite a few things to ensure that this is the case. You need to make sure that the reader can understand easily your paper by making your presentation clear and simple so someone can understand it, even when they are tired, when they might be reviewing your paper, when they might be deciding whether to use the paper results or not. And here is an example of a problem that often creeps in many papers. It is this overuse of abbreviations that all need to be kept in the mind of the reader. But there are many more examples of pitfalls, some of which I will describe later in this presentation, pitfalls that make a paper difficult to understand. So often, if you think of it, the way in which research develops in a PhD project is that you start from some problem, and you have a plan. You have this idea of how to obtain a solution for your problem. But what often happens is that you start with the problem, and in your search for the solution, you actually encounter numerous problems, setbacks. The solution turns out to not be feasible, so you eventually develop a slightly different or maybe much different solution. Now, you do not need to describe all of this adventure, however exciting it is for you and important, since it took months and maybe years of your research. But the paper should clearly just describe how the solution has been obtained from the problem. There is room for describing your adventure as well, but that is at a conference dinner. That is in the social meetup channel that was set up at EXA here. By all means, do tell about your adventures in that alternative venue. You also need to give the reader sufficient information to ensure they can implement your solution. If they cannot build a solution, they are not going to use it. You need to show to the reader that your solution works through as many types of evidence as you can. Some of this evidence might be formal, mathematical proof. Other evidence needs to be empirical, because maybe mathematical proof is not possible, or maybe because additional evidence is needed to just show that the solution is scalable. And in doing this, you need to use instances of the problem. Not only one, multiple instances. Take them from multiple application domains. How likely is it that the reader and potential adopter of your solution will come across the very same instance of the problem that you considered the first time? Very unlikely. So show to them that your solution works for multiple applications from multiple domains. For each of these, look at multiple scenarios. Vary the parameters within realistic ranges. It is unlikely that whoever might adopt your approach will have the same parameter values. So show them that your solution works for a range of parameter values. Especially assess scalability. It almost doesn't matter if scalability is constrained, unless it is only a solution that is applicable to toy problems. It's important to tell the reader so they can decide upfront whether the solution might be useful for their particular application or not. And of course, if applicable, compare to prior solutions. Look for criteria to guide, to drive this comparison. Could be quality of results, could be overheads, could be flexibility, the ability to modify hyperparameters of your approach. Be honest about what is limited about your solution or evaluation, what assumptions you made, what limitations you know about. They will come up in the reviewing if you don't explain them yourselves. present threats to validity. How broadly is the solution applicable? External validity is particularly important. Make it easy for others to use your solution. So be kind to others if you want them to use your work. You spend years on this. It would be good to have someone else use it. So share with them as many artifacts that you have used to build the solution, to implement it, to evaluate it. This could be code, could be models, could be data, proofs, if that's the case, and include additional results that don't fit in the paper in an online repository. Consider offering a fully implemented version of the solution, maybe tools for analysis of software architectures, maybe a middleware that people can integrate into their own solutions. That is the way to help others adopt your work. Offer templates, offer tutorials, and so on. Try to reduce the effort for others to adopt your solution, automate steps, and implement others. So I wanted to end by going through a number of common pitfalls that we often, by way, I mean members of program committees reviewing papers submitted to conferences, researchers reviewing journal manuscripts. So here's one of them. I encounter this very often. There are many senior colleagues in the audience, I can see, so they'll confirm if this is the case. Many papers have this inclination to present their approach, their solution, as a solution instance. So they describe very nicely how a particular approach applies to a specific problem, but it's very hard to generalize. My problem as a reader is never going to be just the same as the one that the author presents in their paper. And I don't want to have to figure out how to generalize. You need to give me the general solution and to use a running example, to use case studies to show me how it applies to specific instances of the problem. Here's another common pitfall, I believe. It is this tendency to present the solution as an incomplete puzzle, because the paper often leaves out information that is essential about the proposed solution. This is not done intentionally because the authors want to withhold information from the reader, but that information seems obvious to them. No surprise, you worked on your solution for maybe years. So aspects of your approach may seem very obvious to you, trivial even, and therefore you think, well, let's not include it in the paper, but you should include it. Or maybe you just accidentally forget to include that detail about the paper. Well, the readers struggle to understand your solution, and the result is, as you imagine, they won't be using it, they won't be citing it. Yet another common pitfall is this, what I call the missing the big picture paper. A paper that describes the steps of the new approach, but does so one bit at a time. It's a bit of a mystery novel, a crime novel. And of course, we all like a mysterious story, but there is no room for it in a research paper. So without sufficient explanation of how these elements of an approach come together and fit together, the readers are forced to imagine themselves how to do it. Many give up, others may try and fail, others yet may bring together your components in a totally new way that doesn't give the expected results. So again, solution will not be adopted. unrealistic assumptions are also encountered in many submissions to conferences, to journals. This is where the problem solves a variant of the problem that makes sometimes implicit, which is even worse, assumptions that are unrealistic. Or maybe parts of the solution may make these assumptions. These are easy to spot by the readers, and they lose interest in your solution. Vagueness, ambiguity is another common pitfall that makes a paper less likely to be cited by others, to be read by others. This is where you describe the solution, or maybe its evaluation in terms that are so imprecise that it is hard for the reader to figure out what you mean, and again, they give up on your paper. I would say that you should almost take the paper that you want to submit somewhere, look for vague words such as some. This is like we ran some experiments. What was this? 2 experiments? Was this 200? So here's a word, and there are other words like this that convey imprecision that should be eliminated from papers. Or vague sentences. A car was reported stolen by the police. Did the police report the car being stolen? Did they steal the car? Well, we assume it's the former, but you know, every such guessing is tiring for the reader. Insufficient evaluation is often a problem encountered in submissions to conferences and journals. You have the solution only applied to a very simple toy example, or to a variant of the problem it actually claims to solve. Aspects of the solution that are essential are not assessed. The effort of someone to adopt the solution, for instance. So this makes the reader unconvinced about the value and generality of the solution. Again, they would give up on adopting your results. So I think I will stop here in the interest of leaving some time for questions, should you have them. But I think that the encouraging take-home message is that PhD research contributions are really likely to meet the prerequisites for publication in top venues. However, what you need to do is this, going the extra mile, as I mentioned, to put the additional effort into ensuring that the impact and rigor of the solutions that you want to present in a research paper are strengthened. And really, authors and reviewers and editors, I wanted to say there, should share the same goals for others to use this work. Significant amount of effort went into it, so we want it to be used. So try to ensure that your papers are easy to understand. Try to ensure that they provide sufficient information to enable adoption, that they include a compelling evaluation to encourage adoption, that assumptions and limitations are sufficiently clear so one can objectively decide whether the solution applies to them or not. You don't want them to be frustrated by spending time and then ending up with no results, and try to reduce the effort for adoption. And of course, avoid the common pitfalls that I have just mentioned. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I will be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you very much, Radu, for a very instructive talk, I would say. We got some questions here. I give first the word to Patricia. Can you explain your question, Patricia?
Hi. Yes, I have a doubt that I bring for years. Usually when you have to choose a running case study or you would like to experiment, to validate your approach using some other case study that you don't have in-house. Sometimes we take inspiration from others' papers and we reuse case studies from others' papers. Is this a good practice or bad? How is considered by the reviewers in general?
I would consider it a very good practice. I think that using your own case studies raises concerns about the case study having been massaged into fitting the problem that you are claiming to solve. I would try, if I use my own case studies, to give more credibility to it by explaining how it comes from maybe industrial practice and needs, how it comes from real data. I think that would be essential, but definitely good practice, I would say. I hope the others agree.
Okay, Matthias, you have a question as well?
Shall I read the question from here? So Matthias is asking about how to handle space limitation. I think it's a matter of time. I'll give a quote from Mark Twain, the American author, who said, writing a long letter to one of his friends, "Sorry for writing you such a long letter, but I didn't have time to write a short one."
Okay.
So I think you can summarize, but it takes effort. Yeah, and of course, that there is always the possibility.
Usually, you have to.
Carry on, Matthias.
Usually, you have the problem to make a trade-off decision. You have to find a compromise where to put your space for.
That's true. I think you need to overspill in online repositories with some of the information.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Nasha, you said a question about extending a conference paper to a journal. How do you know that the extension is sufficient? Is Nasha asking?
My advice is to go well over the recommended, typically 30% extension, to try to extend both the theoretical content and the evaluation. The rigor of the evaluation in particular, and to be very honest about what the extensions are and to list them explicitly from the introduction of the paper. Mm-hmm. If you still have concerns, I would say contact the editor-in-chief and ask for advice. Of course, ask for advice from your supervisor in the first instance.
Thank you.
So another question from Anna is advice about publishing formalisms as a contribution.
I think the same recipe applies. It's just that application is of a different nature, and the evaluation needs to be adapted in the appropriately, I would say. So you would explain how the formalisms better capture what is needed in different domains and problems. I have a longer answer, but time doesn't allow.
Okay, thank you. Mirko,
yeah, but anyway, Radu, I'm also going to copy the questions that maybe there is no time to answer in your channel. Mm-hmm. So if you have time now or later, you can go to that channel and continue the discussion, with anybody that is interested. So just to remark that, we created the channel. I'll copy the question that you cannot answer now. And whenever you have time, you can take an appointment with, our colleagues and discuss.
Okay, a final question then, because of lack of time. Sorry, guys, I move you to the other channel then, the others. Mirko writes a PhD thesis for the moment, and he wants to know that beyond what you were saying here today about papers, but do you have any additional insights on the PhD thesis?
Yeah, I would say write it as a book, write it as something that you would want to read yourself.
Well, that is usually what I advise my students as well. Okay, thank you, Radu. I think we are at the end now of this talk. Thank you very much again for this very inspiring and interesting talk.
Thank you, everyone.
So, guys, if you have any additional issues you want to discuss with Radu, please use the additional channel then. With this, I close this keynote session. Thank you all.
Thank you, Radu.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
So let us invite the session chairs for the industry track. Meanwhile, we are preparing the slide to introduce the industry track. So,
good morning, Henry. This is Olaf.
Hi, good morning. Hi.
I think we decided to stop the recording. It's still running.
Yes, exactly. We are doing that. Stop.